Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Spanning the Need, another great episode that we got going here. And we got another great guest that I've known for a long time and's got a lot of experience in a variety of different places. I hope you're staying safe and cool with the hot weather across the country tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about life and in different varieties of realms, from our state capital, Washington, D.C., all the way to the Midwest, and of what people are doing in our community and nonprofits in the future during the pandemic. To do all this is a good friend of mine, former mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, and Assistant Secretary of Commerce, and now president of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, Jay Williams. Jay, thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us.
Tony, it's great to see you. Thanks for having me, and excited to be here. Can I call you Tony, or is it Anthony now?
Whatever works. Whatever works. I mean, it depends. You know how it is. It depends what mood you're in. Like, my mother calls me Anthony, the full name, but at the same time, it could be whatever works.
I got it. Well, Jay's not in my name, so my real given name, so that's a whole other story. But yeah, so it's good to see you, Tony.
Oh, it's always good to see you. So in my little pre-monologue, we talked about that you've been the mayor of the city of Youngstown in Youngstown, Ohio. If not many people know where that is, it's right between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Cleveland Browns. And you were the Assistant Secretary of Commerce under the Obama administration. So yes. How did you get to going from mayor all the way to where you are now? Give us a little background about what you've done and where you got to where you are today.
Sure. And it certainly didn't start with being mayor. Some would say I took a circuitous route to where I am now as the president and CEO of a very large community foundation. It started all in Youngstown, Ohio, where I was born and raised, and I went to school and graduated from Youngstown State University, and I got into my first phase of a career really by a fluke. I was working at the mall, some retail job, was tired of doing that and wanted to find something else. And I went to a job fair at Youngstown State University, and I was recruited and actually hired on the spot as a teller at one of the local banks, which I thought, hey, that was great. I came to later find out that the Jill Mayfield, Jill, if you're watching, I still have to credit a portion of my career to her, that she had no authority, no permission to hire me, but she did. So I started off as a teller, ended up going through the bank's management training program, stayed at the bank for a total of 10 years between First Federal of Youngstown and First Federal Warren that merged to become First Place Bank. Ultimately ended up as a vice president running the mortgage operations out in Howland. Did a stint at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland in between. And when banking started to change, I was not gratified, because I was in banking and I was had the opportunity to really start impacting Youngstown and helping people purchase homes in the neighborhood of Youngstown, people who were unbanked, who did not think that they would ever be able to purchase a home. As a matter of fact, there are people to this day who probably remember me less as mayor and maybe more as the person who helped them purchase their first home. But long story short, the city was looking for a director of community development, and former Mayor George McKelvey interviewed me. And I remember he said, if you're willing to leave the bank and all the perks that come with working at the bank, a bank that had just gone public, he said, I would be crazy not to give you a shot. So George McKelvey hired me as director of the city of Youngstown's community development agency. Did that for 5 years, was very much involved in the Youngstown 2010 initiative, which inspired me further to ultimately throw my hat in the ring and run an upstart campaign for mayor. And we upset a very prominent political figure who he and I, have maintained a good relationship, Bob Hagan. And that's what led to me being mayor. I served as almost 6 years as mayor. One of the most defining experiences of my life and career, enjoyed it immensely. Was asked to join the Obama administration in 2011. Joined the Obama administration, spent 6 years there, starting off as the director of the Auto Recovery Office when GM and Chrysler were going through their restructuring. Spent a year in the White House, and then spent the final 3 years as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for the Economic Development Administration. So there was a common thread through all of those things. And that common thread was in each and every one of those positions, there was an element of philanthropy that I often found was very beneficial in advancing projects and investments in communities, that was a flexible source of capital and resources. And little did I know that at the end of the administration in 2017, inauguration day was my last official day as all political appointees, last official day. Spent 6 more months contemplating my next move, which included looking at a run for governor during that.
We heard the rumors. You know how it works. And I want to take you back. So I found something when we were talking about your days in Youngstown, and we all.
Oh my gosh, who's that guy?
Yeah, and this is probably this was when Phil Kidd was starting the Defend Youngstown.
Absolutely.
And this is one of the earliest pictures when you were mayor and just running.
Yeah.
So I just thought this would be a great picture, and trust me, there's plenty of mine out there too.
Well, listen, it's both inspiring and discouraging. I mean, so I'm inspired, like that was a guy who was out running 5 and 10K races with relative ease, could roll out of bed and run a relatively respectable 5K. And now here I am, I don't know what, 15 years later or so. And, still like to run, need to do it much more frequently, but would go back to that frame in a heartbeat.
Oh, you're at that perfect frame. Don't worry about it.
You're a guy.
And I think that brings up a great point that you just mentioned a little bit earlier, that you were that economic development run you did the 2010. That's how much dedication you gave to that area.
Listen, Youngstown was home. I absolutely love Youngstown, blood, sweat, and tears, and was tired of people writing the city off, dismissing the city, holding the city up as a poster child for deindustrialization and failure. And don't get me wrong, we gave ourselves plenty of black eyes, and unfortunately, we still sometimes can be our own worst enemy. And I say we, I mean, Youngstown's just a part of who I am. I still got my Defend Youngstown shirt upstairs. My wife has threatened to throw it away a bunch of times. My Youngstown 2010 t-shirts that I still wear proudly. But it was a community. It is a community with so much potential. And I felt that I was blessed and fortunate to be able to graduate from Youngstown State University, be gainfully employed, and was inspired and encouraged by so many others who saw the potential in Youngstown. So it was my reasonable service, and it was a defining part of my life. And to this day, I tell and give Youngstown analogies, the good, the bad, and the ugly, even here in Hartford, Connecticut, which has a lot of similarities. And my staff knows that, Youngstown's where I'm from, and I meet people from across the country, literally from across the country, who have a Youngstown connection or a Youngstown story, and I'm always proud to encounter them.
Well, and I think that's really funny that you mentioned that, because I think, and I've talked to a lot of people across, friends, colleagues, just in other areas, and I still get the same thing you just said. Everyone's got a small connection to Youngstown, which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
it just, again, when I was 6 years in DC, I'd be on the metro, and somehow some conversation would come up about some Youngstown landmark or people passing through Youngstown or relative in Youngstown. Same thing here in Hartford. I have been in other parts of the globe, and believe it or not, have had Youngstown, Ohio encounters. So yeah, it's a city well known.
Yeah, and you went to Washington, D.C. to do great things under the Obama administration, and then you kind of take that break. And then how did you get to Hartford?
Great question. So right, I thought after the end of the administration, I'd take a couple of weeks off and, need to work. So it ended up being more than a couple of weeks, what's 6 months worth of weeks. So I don't know, 24, 30 weeks. So the longest period of literally unemployment in fact, having never been without a job since I was, 14, 15 years old. So it was an interesting time. I was at peace. We were blessed to still be able to live. But the Hartford Foundation was going through a search for its next president and CEO. And an executive recruiter reached out to me. We had a conversation. It sounded intriguing. And they talked about a city that reminded me a lot of Youngstown, although we cover more than Hartford. We cover 29 towns in the greater Hartford area. And when I thought about my experience as mayor, my experience as director of community development, my experience in Washington, D.C. of economic development, and the things to build a community. Remember earlier I said that common thread had always been philanthropy. So, Youngstown 2010 success and so many others, the Raymond John Ween Foundation, the Youngstown Foundation, had so much to do in contributing to the success then and even the success now. And the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, the chairwoman of the board was determined that the foundation was going to take a new position of leaning into its work, being less risk averse, being more proximate to the challenges. And I'm like, wow, I'm all about that. That's been the defining arc of my career. And they, were looking for an individual with a different background and different experiences. So it's one of the largest community foundations in the country. It's one of the oldest. And to be able to lead an organization with a group of colleagues who are talented, a board that is committed to our mission, that's how I ended up here in Hartford. And it's been 3 years. Just 2 weeks ago was my third anniversary here at the foundation. And it has been amongst the most gratifying experiences, of my life. And it really, very much ties to my experiences in Youngstown, Ohio.
Well, and I think that brings up that you love to just do good. You talk about philanthropy. Hartford is one of the biggest and one of the oldest in the country. And what are some, so we're now in this pandemic and nonprofits across the country are hurt. And we know that there's different resources, but what are just some of Hartford's foundation's challenges and some of the things that you're managing during this pandemic?
Our challenges are not unlike challenges across other nonprofit organizations. Fortunately, we have resources that have allowed us to navigate this. And when I say navigate it, most importantly, that have allowed us to provide uninterrupted service and resources to our communities and to the nonprofit partners that we invest in and that we try to help build their capability and their capacity. But we had to navigate going remotely in a very abrupt manner. The first and foremost concern was the well-being and safety of our staff. We had been planning and evolving the foundation, and what we were planning to do in months, we ultimately ended up having to do in days and weeks. And I'll tell you, frankly, we're going to emerge as a better, stronger, more impactful organization as a result of this. And some of the things that we've had to adopt, we're going to maintain even, post-COVID, whatever that looks like and whatever that happens to occur. So, the resource challenges are significant. There are always more demands and needs than there are resources available. We've had to build new relationships. We've had to exercise new muscles, become more efficient, less bureaucratic. So again, it's been a journey. I wouldn't have chosen to pursue this path, but I certainly would have said, if you give me the organization that we are now, that we will be emerging out of this, I would have said, that's where we're headed. I just would have never imagined we would have had to have had to travel this path to get there. So the challenges are immense, but the staff, the board are committed, and I couldn't be more proud of the folks that I'm working with.
Now, I've heard of a lot of COVID response funds that are being created across the country in a variety of different either nonprofits, the state government. Is this something that Hartford has done, and how did you go about it?
Absolutely. We activated our disaster response, our COVID fund, probably, 7 to 10 days into the onset of the pandemic and the remote work. A couple of years ago, we created a disaster response fund as a result of the hurricanes in Florida and Texas and Puerto Rico. And we were fortunate that one of our giving circles, the Latino Endowment Fund, was really a source of inspiration for us creating that fund. So the fund was created, and then we activated it early into the pandemic crisis with $1 million of our own resources. And subsequently, we've brought in another, I want to say the figure is close to $5 million from our donors, from our communities. We put another $6 million of our own money into that fund. It's a rapid response fund. It has been instrumental in helping to address emergency, basic human needs, medical care, sustaining individuals from helping to prevent eviction, small business access to capital for minority-owned businesses, and ultimately, is a part of our mission that is, this journey of dismantling the systemic and structural racism that has existed in this country. That's a position that we took about a year and a half ago. It was a strategic focus, and we have seen COVID has laid bare the issues in this country that I, 2 or 3 weeks ago, actually had a chance to speak on another local show in the Valley. So it has been, quite a journey, but like I said, couldn't be prouder of the folks that I call my colleagues.
Now, what have you, so I would assume that you guys have been kind of spending money left and right from this response. Now, how much do you think you've probably given to the community as of right now?
That's a great question, and I normally have these figures off the top of my head. We have put out, upwards of probably $6 million at this point, from March through now, and I'm probably short selling ourselves. So when my staff sees this, they're going to tape it or staple it to my forehead. And I can tell you that we've seen more than $20 million in donations between the beginning of this year and now. So there are still significant resources that we have, and as we speak, are putting out into the community. When this is all said and done, we will likely put upwards of $50 to $60 million out into this community, which is about $20 million more than we do in a typical year. And that's a direct result of the generosity of our donors that have allowed us to, we've had donations from $15, individual donations from $15 to individuals who have given $1 million. We've seen corporate contributions and donations come in. So we are just honored and humbled to be seen as a credible, reliable partner in helping to address the needs of this global epidemic of COVID, in addition to the longstanding epidemic of structural racism has brought to bear on our communities.
And I think we look back at, we started this coronavirus and it kind of really hit everyone starting in kind of that end of February, beginning of March, started to hit Eastern Seaboard, West, and then just started going across the United States. Well, and the COVID has really put a huge burden on resources that we never knew needed. And it really have brought a lot of things to the forefront. And we talk about that a lot of these small nonprofits that do social services or that do a variety of different types of food banks, anything, are becoming closed or they're not being able to do what they do. So right. What are some resources that these nonprofits can look at? PPP, what would you recommend to some nonprofits that are small, that 5, 6, 7 employees that really don't have the resources that you guys have?
Right. And it's a challenge and it's unfortunate. And we had to reconcile that at the beginning of this crisis, come to terms with there were going to be nonprofits that have existed for decades that entered into this crisis, this pandemic, that would not exit intact as ongoing concerns, just because the devastation is too severe. The resources are woefully inadequate. And as a result, we have sought to try to help nonprofits sustain themselves through direct financial assistance, through capacity building, trying to help them navigate the prospect of collaborating in ways that they have not, part of the thing, and we're not immune to this. I mean, you have to figure out in this time of crisis, you can't say yes to everything. You have to say no. And that's soul crushing when you think about the mission of our nonprofits and trying to triage or prioritize, which of these horrible things do you try to address first? People who are experiencing food insecurity, people who are facing homelessness or eviction, people who are battling substance abuse or have mental health challenges. What about the parents who have to work and whose children are out of school, and who's going to care for them? So, you pick which one of those is most important. And just that one could consume all the resources available. And you've got all of them simultaneously. So the importance of collaborating has always been paramount, and it's even more so now. Advocacy for nonprofits receiving resources from federal, state, local governments, because they're providing needed, necessary, basic human needs that are the obligation of society, that are often provided by public entities, but in this instance, understanding that the public coffers are running bare. So, we have sought to convene, to collaborate, to fund, to support, to build up, but also to recognize that some nonprofit agencies, as they close their doors and shutter their services, that those clients, those residents, those citizens still need to be cared for. So identifying alternatives, which are few and far between, is also something we found ourselves during these last several months.
Now, and I know as a nonprofit founder and a person that runs a nonprofit, we don't have staff. We're fortunate like that, but we've also probably lost money with canceling of charity events that are pretty much maybe a 60 to 80% of the income for the following year. What advice do you have for those types of nonprofits that they're just trying to help? They have great emphasis on just giving back.
Right.
Or they may have one or two employees. What advice can you give them that just to help them, to really guide them in the right direction?
Actually, I should be asking you that, Tony. I forgot. Yeah, you know this better than I. You were in philanthropy and creating nonprofit well before I ventured into this field formally through the foundation that you created. And I remember participating in a handful of the events, the basketball and the arena football and all the other things. In fact, I still probably have some scars, from participating. But it's really about rethinking the mission, their commitment to the mission, which is typically unwavering and unequivocal, but recognizing that you have to collaborate. We often struggle with, prior to this, the number of nonprofits who are operating in the same space. They all are committed. They all say, well, we do it a little bit differently. We do it a little bit better. And you feel the passion that they have, but in reality, there are limited resources. So if two nonprofits operating in the same or similar space can get an efficiency of scale by collaborating, that has to be the priority, not the preservation of the nonprofit as an entity just for the sake of its own self-preservation. And that sounds perhaps callous, but unfortunately there's some organizations just about the preservation of the organization. Some of them it's and not the majority, but a few. But even a few is too many in light of the crisis that we're facing. So thinking about mission first, and if there's a better, more efficient way to serve the client or the segment of the community, that should be the priority, and everything else coming secondary to that. And I realize that's easier said than done. And I think that we as a community foundation have a role and obligation to support those organizations that have come to that conclusion, and there have been a number of them that have. So, we also think continuing to advocate for resources that would be available to nonprofits, because they provide such an important, sometimes unheralded, unseen. It's not glamorous and sexy all the time, but if they did not exist, in fact, I remember years ago I would reference Irma Bombeck, who had an essay that talked about if the nonprofits and the volunteers disappeared, the world that we would live in would be very unappealing.
Well, and I think everyone that either runs a foundation, no matter if they have a staff of 10 or a staff of 0, they want to do good. That's all they want to do.
Right. And
I remember you playing in the Game of Hope. You played, I think, in a couple different versions of the Game of Hope. Yeah. And
was that when I was being lightly recruited for D1 ball, the picture you showed, or probably not? That was just
this was the D1 version. This is, I think, one of the years for that. But you
have to let me show these to my son, who is going to be. I'm still tall. Well, he's 9, so don't take this with a grain of salt. I'm still stronger, taller, faster, better athlete. But it's just a matter of years where this kid is going to be just dominating me in every way that you could imagine. So I'll show him these pictures of Dad's quote unquote glory days.
Hey, this is live and being recorded, so you're more than welcome to show them the video and everything. And it was funny because you said that, and I'm like, well, I think I have a picture. And don't worry, I did not have this planned. I just
Spontaneity.
I just have them at my disposal, which is kind of funny.
Well, I'll tell people I moved very well without the ball. You know, my entirety of my basketball career, I went to a small parochial school with just a handful of male athletes. And I got good grades. So when people became academically ineligible, I moved up the depth chart. That did not correlate to moving up in performance. So I moved well without the ball. I became a defensive specialist. I could take a charge with the best of them. But, a scoring machine, I was not. So I have higher hopes for Ethan.
Well, we get a good laugh. Sorry, we're just having some fun, guys. But I think that it just shows how much you're invested in the community. No matter if you're mayor, you're just the community economics. Because I think you were second year mayor in that picture, I think. But I think you have an emphasis on really putting into philanthropy and really making an impact. And I think that gives some good insight on your side about what you've been doing in the community, how nonprofits can really if you're really having trouble, go to your community foundations.
Absolutely. And Youngstown and the Mahoney Valley has been blessed with, again, the Youngstown Foundation, the Raymond John Ween Foundation. When my wife and I were back in Youngstown, we created the Mayor's Community Foundation to give proceeds from the annual community ball that we have to small nonprofit organizations. So Youngstown does have those, and I'm sure I'm forgetting, a handful of the other community and or family foundations. So Raymond John Ween is actually a family foundation, but it really acts and operates like a community foundation. And I was thrilled about the contributions from the foundations to the amphitheater. So again, that shows it's a quality of life. It is something that is a jewel for not only the city residents, but the entire Mahoney Valley. And, turn to your community foundation. The resources are not unlimited. Our investments are subject to the market fluctuations. There are restrictions and covenants and that we have to abide by, but community foundations are a source of inspiration and hope for the communities.
Yeah, and the last one would be Community Foundation Mahoney Valley. That'd be
I knew I was forgetting. Yeah.
And you know what? In all three of them, the ladies are phenomenal.
They are. I know them all. Yes, they are.
And I think anyone nonprofit, go to your local community foundation if you can. If you can't find one, all you have to do is look up community foundations and Google it. When you Google it, there'll be it's the national standards. You can find wherever is the closest to you, and that'll help you. That'll be able to help you, especially what Jay does at the Hartford. And when you're giving out $5, $6, $7 million to just put money back into the community when there's no money to go when people are laid off and everything like that.
Yeah, you're right. And the women who run those foundations are just outstanding citizens, outstanding individuals who I've had the pleasure of knowing when I was still in. Well, I know them now, but I certainly had the pleasure of working with either in their current or their previous capacities during my time as both mayor and community development director.
Now we've put millions of dollars in the community from February, March till now, with still unknowns for the future. So what would you recommend for nonprofits moving forward, including your own self? Like, what are you thinking 2 months, 3 months, and 6 months down the road when we don't even have a vaccine? We don't know where everything's going. We don't even know if we're going to send kids to school.
Boy, it's almost as if you're in our staff meetings. You're right. You have to keep some of your powder dry because there are so many unknowns. So as much money as we put out in the first half of the year, we are also looking as we speak at the second half of the year, trying to ensure that we preserve resources to get us to the end of the year. If you put out too much too soon and the virus, flares back up, then you're in a precarious position. If you don't put out enough, you're in a precarious position, and it is not a science in terms of how much money to put out. You have to try to also take into the account our donors have been exceptional in their generosity, but they are not immune to the effects on the economy or their portfolios or their employment. Fortunately, they've said they put others first in terms of making their donations. But you're right. How do we balance that? We're trying to figure that out. I am fortunate to work with a group of folks who are smarter than I. That has always been the key to success of a leader, is surrounding yourself with people who are more talented and smarter in their respective areas. Empower them and then make an informed decision after consulting with them. So we don't know, and I would say to those nonprofits is try as best as possible to balance the current immediate needs with the unknowns, knowing that there will be additional resources needed. And again, it sounds cliche, but that's the best advice you can give, in the midst of something that none of us would have imagined we would be experiencing in our lifetime.
Well, I don't think so either. And if you look back at the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919, it didn't end for almost a year. It went
Right.
from summer to summer.
Right.
And it just, I hate to say it, and I don't know the detail. It just dissipated. It just didn't go around. Was that because of the weather? We just don't know. We don't know how it's going to react.
This, there are the experts who say we're going to have to, we live with viruses all the time. But we've also have vaccines and other means by which to address and mitigate the effects. At some point, I believe that will be the case with COVID. I do not, and I know what you mean. It's not just going to disappear on its own. It will, between the vaccines, between viruses that run their natural course. But I don't think any of us, should think that, a year from now, this will just be a distant memory, and we may not be walking around with masks on, we may not be socially distancing, and I certainly hope that's the case. But just as we've lived with the influenza virus for generations, that may be the case. But with the vaccines, the studies that continue to advance our knowledge. Fortunately, now we have technology and resources that were not existent back in 1918, but there are also more people. And the damage that can be done is greater in magnitude. But we don't want lives lost. We don't want quality of lives deteriorated, which is why it's important to have, the focus and the efforts and competent leadership, in every level addressing this issue.
Well, and I think that kind of culminates what we're going through now. I mean, people talk about should masks be required to help? Well, studies show it. And then there's some studies that show, well, no, it really doesn't. So which studies do you believe at the end of the day? And it's just all in what you come up with.
Yeah, but I think, if you're going to err, I'd rather err on the side of having a mask that maybe is less effective or not effective than not having one and finding out, oops, So clearly, I don't think there's any debate in transmission, of two individuals or a group of individuals, none of whom are protecting themselves, how the virus can spread. I would be one that if I was a betting person, I would rather have the mask and rather practice some form of social distancing. I get it. You can't live in a cave. I don't want to live in a cave. We've had to make our own decisions about how much to engage and come out of this sort of lockdown as the next person. But I think that the fact that it has become politicized, the fact that somehow the wearing of a mask is perceived, as a statement against, a political view is just asinine. It's just asinine beyond belief. And wearing a mask is not just about yourself; it's about others in your circle, community, or society.
Well, look at 1918, 1919. They wore masks.
Right.
People don't realize.
Right.
And they wore masks to slow down. And here's what's going to happen. You don't slow it down. You're in the nonprofit area. You're going to lose nonprofits. You're going to lose the services of what they were doing in some capacity. There will not be money to be donated by those individuals. So it'll be a domino effect.
You're going to lose more than that. If we don't contain this, nonprofits, you're going to lose corporations. You're going to lose segments of society. You're going to lose institutions. We're going to lose our way of life as we know it. And that's what's just so incredulous that in the face of science and data and experience, what I find interesting are the people who it's a hoax until they or someone in their family gets it, or it's not a big deal until they get it. And there have been, very high profile instances of people who are railing against this until it touched them. And then all of a sudden it becomes very real. So, you don't want to see people afflicted. But if that happens and they then turn into believers and they turn into witnesses for others who might be suspicious. And don't get me wrong, the government is far from perfect. I'm an African-American male who very much am aware of the Tuskegee experiment and what, society is capable of inflicting upon human beings. That being said, I also, believe that, taking preventative measures that are reasonable, that I would rather err on the side of caution than to, think that this is something that need not be taken seriously, because as we have seen, the effects and the outcomes of that are deadly.
And if we take it back 2 years, you've been in the position about 2-3 years?
3 years. 3 years.
Well, when we talked about that you were looking at maybe running for governor, or the rumors were going, could you picture yourself right now, if you won, what you'd be going through right now as governor?
Yeah, you do think about that, or as mayor. I looked at running for governor, but I served as mayor, and to think about the obligation you have for the well-being of the public, whether it's a city or an entire state, having unlimited needs and very limited resources, having and I'll say it in my own estimation, because I've seen it up close and personal. A dysfunctional, incompetent, federal administration, that is harming, the efforts of this country trying to put our arms around something like this. When you think about that, as a mayor or a governor, not being able to turn to the federal government, not because the federal government always gets it right, because it is supposed to be an ally and have assets and experience and knowledge and tools that aren't available at the state and federal level. And when that is nothing but, a chaotic cacophony of failure and incompetence, I can't imagine the pressures on, I can't imagine the pressures on mayors and governors, and basically have to almost go it alone.
Well, and just to end, that is, no matter what public official you're in right now, this is no unforeseen territory, unknown.
Yeah, for all of us. Yeah, absolutely.
And not enough money to do what you really need to do.
There's not enough money, right? So that's why it's not always about money. It's about behaviors. It's about being able to inspire, cajole, persuade people to change behaviors that will begin to allow us to get ahead of this. Because you can throw all the money that we can print at this. The virus is indifferent to money. The virus it doesn't care about money. It is about the behaviors that limit the spread, that try to contain the transmission rates. Behavior, to a certain extent, maybe, if not more important, certainly is equal to the resources. Financial resources are absolutely necessary. Developing a vaccine and getting the PPE and providing for those who have been adversely impacted. But we could print money and everybody could have an unlimited amount of money. If the behavior doesn't change, money can't buy you a non-diagnosis once you've been diagnosed. It doesn't make the virus go away.
Yeah, and COVID will put a burden on nonprofits. It's going to push them to the brink.
Absolutely.
So, Jay, I appreciate you taking the time tonight. I know you got a lot going on. You got a little extra time for some question and answer period?
Well, absolutely. Listen, Tony, we've all got a lot going on. It's been a long day, but listen, my day is no longer than anybody else's, and I'm fortunate that, to be in a position to try to help. So, yeah. Well,
here's the first question coming through. This, her name is Nicole. And her question is going to pop up on the screen. It's going to say, what is one of the biggest challenges that nonprofits will be facing in the coming 3 to 6 months?
Great question, Nicole. I'm glad you said one of the biggest challenges, because there are going to be multiple challenges coming at nonprofits simultaneously. One of the biggest will be their ability to continue to sustain their resources. Nonprofits are often sustained by donors. If those donors are unemployed or underemployed or have had wage cuts or are worried about their own well-being, it's going to be hard for them to give to the nonprofits the way they have in the past. And while the giving is perhaps challenged, the need and the cost that the nonprofits are facing are going up. So that's going to be a huge challenge. It's going to be a challenge even if we get back to some sense of normalcy for the nonprofits to figure out how to navigate in a post-COVID world. So the number of challenges are endless, but I think at the top, near the top of that list, are just the resources that they need. I'll tell you, in Connecticut, there was just an announcement made. There's been, the Nonprofit Alliance has been going back and forth with the state about the level of funding that the state provides. They'd asked the state to tap into some of the surplus, which is now gone. The state just announced that nonprofits that receive PPP would not be eligible for some of the other funding. So just any number of things, but at the top of the list has to be resources.
Yeah, that's a great question, because like we talked about a little bit earlier, is the unknowns.
Right.
And,
absolutely.
And in Ohio, it is almost probably similar to Connecticut right now, is they're wheeling down their rainy day fund. And that just, there may not be nothing left, because a lot of nonprofits do contracted work for the government in regards to social services, social work. I served on the board of children's services. So foster care is a huge.
Yep. Yeah, Connecticut had prior to January this year, Connecticut had a $2.9 billion rainy day fund. The deficit that the state is facing will eliminate that and then some.
Yeah, and I know it's just very stress. I mean, we watch the governor. You probably do the exact same. So you hear the press conferences and actually, I'll follow up on something you said. The PPP, is it still available?
To my knowledge, so we did not apply for assistance. We just, we were blessed with the resource, and it felt that philosophically it was just not something that we would feel comfortable doing. So I'm not sure. I do believe it is still available. I know a number of nonprofit organizations appropriately made the determination that they should and needed to apply, and many of them were successful in getting it. But again, there's no such thing as a free lunch, so it doesn't come without its strings and its challenges. It is I will acknowledge a very important and timely program. One of the better, I think, responses from the federal government writ large. I'm not just talking about this administration, but certainly one of the better federal responses, that particular program, that we've seen over the years. So yeah, I don't know about the details, but it has helped sustain some very important activities and organizations.
Yeah, and our government loves initials, the PPP.
Yeah, the acronym, the alphabet soup.
Yeah, and that's just something to follow up, because there may be PPP loans left. I know there was $100 million, or the last number I looked, but I know a lot of that is running out as of the end of this month. And I know they're looking at extending it, but we don't know what new legislation is going to be coming out in a new stimulus package.
You're right. Yeah, right. That's being debated. The debate or the starts soon in Washington, but who knows where it ends and what ultimately comes out of it. And in the meantime, the crisis continues. Exactly.
So I have another question. This one's from Jen. When you talk about community foundations, what resources would they have for small nonprofits with few to no employees?
That's a great question, Jen. And that varies according to the community foundation. And remember, there are community foundations, family foundations, even corporate foundations. So we, for instance, have our nonprofit support program and our small agency program that are specifically tailored to those smaller nonprofits. If they have no employees, that might be difficult. It really is less about the employees and what are the activities that the nonprofit is engaged in. So I'm not suggesting that a nonprofit, no employees, wouldn't be eligible for funding, but the resources we provide are grants. We provide technical assistance where if there's some expertise, we will pay for that expertise to come be provided to the organization. We also have general operating, so there's grants for programs, and then there are general operating grants that the nonprofit organization can use to make its payroll, to keep itself alive. But as you can imagine, the demand always exceeds the availability of funds. So what I would encourage you to do is to approach your community foundation, ask them about the types of programs to support. And again, in Youngstown, you also have the Raymond John Weed Foundation, which works very similar to community foundation in supporting nonprofits and those types of activities in the Mahoning Valley.
Yeah, that's a great overview of just look for your community foundations. They're more than willing to help you in a variety of ways, or at least point you in the right direction, because they know the community very well.
And sometimes the answer is no. I mean, I will say that here, they are struggling with their own challenges. So it's not always the answer you want to hear, but they certainly, I think I'm comfortable saying, would be open for a conversation and trying to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for the info. I appreciate that. This question is from Mike. His question is, thank you for your service to the nonprofit area. What is your best memory on a grant that you gave out that hit home the most?
Oh, man. Wow.
I think he got you on that one.
Your kids you like better. Well, I know there's one of my kids I like better, and I can say that because I only have one. I don't know. I think, grants that ultimately are about, strengthening the community. So, we just did a program that is providing access to capital for small business entrepreneurs, women and minority-owned businesses that are serving residents in the community. There's a grant that I'm excited about that we're doing that I almost announced on your show that I would have gotten killed for, because I don't want to get ahead of
the official. Come on, Jay. Come on, Jay. Tell us what.
Yeah,
come on. Give us the insight.
Let's just say it's important that there is access to broadband on a wide scale. That's nothing new. So I'm not speaking out of school here. But one of the challenges and things that has excited me is that the broadband internet access is a utility now. We need to recognize it. It is as relevant and pertinent to life and living as running water, electricity, and heat. And there are still too many communities and too many residents that don't have those things on a regular basis. So, we've done work with the schools here to increase broadband access. You name it, community safety there. I don't know which individual one I can pick. It is just, I think when we see the outcomes, when we see lives being impacted, that's, that to me is what's most gratifying. So I'm sorry if that sounds like a political answer. I still got my political chops or instincts that every now and then surface, but yeah, I don't know if I can pick a single one.
Well, and I think overall of what you do is good, because you know what you're doing in regards to Hartford. And how big is Hartford compared to where you were?
We're doing. So yeah, I've only been here for 3 years, so I've got a staff that knows this community back and forth. But yeah, my experiences in Youngstown have very much helped to inform and shape my experiences here.
Yeah. So that was the last question, Jay. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. It's always good.
Congratulations on your show, the success. I look forward to watching future episodes, and to you and your new wife, I wish you all the best, and look forward, hopefully, when we're back in the Valley, our paths will cross again.
Not a problem. If you want to stay on after this, we'll catch up. But Jay, always a pleasure. Thank you. If you want to check out more podcasts, you can check them out at anthonyvspano.com for future episodes and who's lined up. Be safe. God bless, and have a good night.